Wednesday the 14th of January. My name is Councillor Ben Maney. I'm the chair of the committee this evening. Before we move on through the item agendas, I'd just like to remind everybody present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the council's website. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do. Councillor Green and Councillor Holloway, but Councillor Cecil is substituting for Councillor Holloway tonight.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Cecil. Okay, so the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 20th of November 2024, I move that the minutes are approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No, thank you. Okay, we can take it that they are approved then. Item 3 concerns urgent items. I've not been notified of any urgent items, but I'll just defer to Rhiannon again. Are there any urgent items that you know of? No, thank you. Item 4, do members have any declarations of interest?
Chair, I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but I'm concerned about the, should we say, the thickness of our agendas that we're getting at such a short notice, a few days' notice. Now, the thing is, I take my role as a councillor and on committees very seriously, and I like to be understanding of these agendas. But receiving the agendas, the 230 pages, there was one recently, I think before Christmas, 500 pages, only a few days before a meeting, doesn't give us enough time to, should we say, absorb some of the material in which we've got to make decisions about. I mean, it doesn't work out, should I say, there we are, we're talking about a 2.5 hour slot now, in respect of a time frame for a meeting, okay? So the idea of that 2.5 hours plus 10 minutes is that we get through all the items and all the business. Well, I think we'll probably struggle tonight, but it says that mostly it should be just 2 items on the agenda. That's the idea behind the 2.5 hours, Chair, right? Well, you check that out tonight. I don't know. I'm counting 7, 8, 9 items on that agenda in this 2.5 hour slot, so it doesn't bear well, and it doesn't fit. So it's just registering that I think it's asking quite a bit of councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I know this is something that you raised at the informal meeting as well, and you were right to. It is something we need to address. I think that I particularly agree with your comments in relation to the timeliness of the reports that are coming to us. It's not an overly, for me, it's not an overly large agenda, or thick. Well, it is in the context of the the rule that we were all briefed on today via email. But I agree with you. There's a huge amount of detail, huge amount of information in here. Each report is it's dripping with information. That's really important, and I agree. My agenda only arrived late on Thursday. And I haven't had a chance to read it as in depth as I would like to. So I think that's right. It's a valid comment that I think we know. It's right to place it on record publicly as well, because we have been saying this privately for some time. But I think officers and us as a committee have to come together to try and figure out a way of getting around this, because we cannot do our job when we receive reports like this with just really a few days to read it. So thank you for raising that.
You're welcome, Chair.
I'm sure other members agree, but as I say, we'll take that away and have a discussion away from the meeting tonight. So moving on to item, is it where we're up to now? It's item 5. Item 5 is the communication engagement strategy, cabinet discussion and recommendations briefing. Now, I think items 5, 6, 7 and 8 are all they're all briefing notes to some extent. So could I ask officers to take those together, please, for the sake of time? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the 4 briefing notes provided are for the committee's information. These provide the committee with feedback from cabinet discussions and decisions following the pre-decision scrutiny and the outcome of a rejected call-in request. So this is purely for transparency purposes. So if the committee have any questions or queries, please do get in touch with myself and Lucy outside of the meeting, and we're will answer any particular questions that you have. But again, it's just for information purposes.
Thank you. Nonetheless, do members have any comments or questions on any of those items? No? Okay. We'll move on once we find out who this person is trying to get in. No worries. Okay, so item 9 then is budget scrutiny Grange Waters business case. I've got Sheila Murphy down to present that, but she's not here clearly.
That would be me, Chair. Thank you. I'm Michelle Lucas.
Thank you very much. Would you like to present the item?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity of bringing the Grange Waters business case to committee. This sets out a very ambitious and exciting programme for Grange Waters. I'm sure many of you will be aware of Grange Waters. It's a beautiful site in South Ockenden. Currently runs an awful lot of programmes for children and young people with special educational needs, works closely with a number of our schools. We've always felt that actually there are many opportunities for Grange Waters. I think it's struggled because it hasn't had its own website, it hasn't had its own identity, it hasn't had a dedicated booking system. So currently, colleagues, everything's done manually, which makes it very difficult and very cumbersome. And also, we've not had the opportunity to really market Grange Waters, to undertake a real marketing exercise to see if there are other sort of more schools just outside Thurrock that would be interested in using it. So this business case sets out the fact that we believe, with some investment, it's around 71k, colleagues, just to be clear, we are looking to bring in the following financial year 150k net. We're hoping to do better than that if we can. You'll see in the business case it sets out that we would like to get an online booking system. We'd like to get someone in to do some marketing, and we'd like our own website because we believe that will really drive sales for the site. There is a little line in there about phase 2. One of our ambitions is to look at what else we can offer for children and young people with special educational needs. We currently spend quite a significant amount of money on sort of outreach, sort of support for children with special educational needs, short breaks, those sorts of things, and we're hoping that we can further develop the Grange Waters site to be able to address some of those needs as well. And I think, colleagues, I'll leave it there unless I'm sure there will be questions. Happy to take questions on it.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good report, and it's about time that someone started to do something with this fantastic asset that we've got in Thurrock. We have competition, as we know, from our neighbours next door. When I was a councillor 10 years ago, now that's why I'm pleased to see that actually someone's going to do something about this, because 10 years ago we was trying to should we say, was going down paying many visits to the people that was down there that was working. They come up with some very, very good ideas, because at the time you had to go through Thameside Theatre as to get bookings down there. So you get a family that would be on holidays or something like that and say, let's go down Grange Waters for the day. That they couldn't go down there and actually book. They had to go through Thameside Theatre, and it was a bit of a weird process as well, if you remember rightly. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity, it really is, and I'll take my hat off to you that you're going to do something. But you will need a CAF, for sure, yeah. I think, down there. I think that's a must. One of the things I would say, or I'd like to bring to your attention, was the entrance. Yeah. Now, that's down Buckles Lane, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but you used to have a lot of children taken down there, used to stay in the lodges from schools and things like that. And I've always felt that that's not the best of entrance, shall we say. There is another entrance, and that comes off of North Stifford. And there was shall we say, there was talk then of just joining the road up that comes through to where the car park is. It isn't a lot of area as to put a road in. And I think if you can look to be doing something with that in the near future, it would add to the experience of going down there, because it's a lovely bit of countryside as to go down that road at North Stifford to go on to the site, rather than go through Buckles Lane. And we all know what I'm talking about at Buckles Lane, don't we? So, yeah. So when are we looking to to have some of this up and running. Michelle, thank you.
So what we're... Can I come back, Chair? Sorry. Thank you. So what we're looking to do, we've already brought some staff over to start thinking about the marketing. We're purchasing the domains as we speak, sort of grangewaters.com, which I'm very excited about. So we are starting now to mobilise. Clearly, we need to get it through committee, get it approved, but we are beginning that mobilisation. And certainly we've set ourselves, that 150k from April the 1st. So we've set ourselves, a target that we believe is achievable. We believe that by doing what we need to do around the marketing, around the new systems and getting in a new instructor will really enable us to drive the business forward. It's really interesting, Councillor, because everyone I speak to always say, it's great. There's so many things we could look to do, and I think now's our opportunity. So I have to say I'm incredibly excited, having had it sort of in my portfolio for quite a while now, to see the sort of drive and passion to really sort of move it forward is great for me. So thank you.
Yep, Councillor Jones again.
Thank you. But will you have a booking on site, bookings on site as well? Because I think, apart from the website and being able to book online.
Yeah, we're looking at an industry-wide booking system actually, which will make bookings an awful lot easier. I remember having to book through there to go over there, and it really isn't helpful for us at the moment. So using the technologies that are available now, we believe that'll expand our sort of customer base and business and really drive the work that Grange Waters does some really great work with children, young people, special education needs, and we want to expand that.
Thank you. Councillor Howden and then Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my question, I'll just congratulate Michelle on everything she's done with that site over the years. I seem to remember when I was portfolio holder for education the first time, Grange Waters had no audited accounts. Huge amounts of it were cash in hand jobs. It made an annual loss of 2/3, £500,000 or something. We had people inappropriately living there that I think Miss Lucas had to evict herself, and now it washes its own face. It's quite a remarkable turnaround. So congratulations. One of the main reasons we've always retained Grange Waters is because we saw the opportunity to massively reduce the cost of spot purchasing we were using for looked after children. It was a fabulous and much more economical resource to use for neat children. The reality is the council, as it currently is not going to be here in a couple of years. Grange Waters is of sufficient size and scope that it's probably too big to simply be used as one provision for one small unitary authority. So what are we doing now to have conversations with the existing other upper tier authorities in the county to try and cement Grange Waters as a looked after children resource that can be used by a wider pool, because it's always been a misnomer that Grange Waters has always been a little bit too big for that type of provision just for us alone.
That's a really good point, and I think by doing some of the marketing work we're doing, that's sort of phase one, because actually we need to expand, where people know about us, and clearly that's an issue. I think for me, there's an opportunity now in some of those initial conversations, and there'll be lots of conversations about what things look like going forward, to enable us to move Grange Waters forward, to get what we need now, I think will put us in a really good place for when we are part of whatever we're part of, colleagues, and then we can look at sort of pulling in more, I would like to say resources, because, this is phase one for us. We're thinking about what else we can do. There's so much we could do on that site. So I think it's a point well made, Councillor. I think we do need to be absolutely minded of what's going on there. But for me, here and now, is making sure we get the booking system, the marketing, and it up and running into a good place so that we can say, look what we've got here.
Thanks, Michelle. Just very specifically though, assuming the council won't be here in, say, 24 months' time, we know how many NEETs there will be in Brentwood and Basildon, for example, if we're clustered with them. We know roughly how many young people in those boroughs access respite care through the county council. So we must be able to create some type of model where we can show that Grange Waters, if retained by a new authority for this purpose, can offer X amount of places for those young people. And I'm concerned if we don't do that type of work now, Grange Waters could just be seen as one of those underused facilities that is kind of one of those obscure assets that a new council has inherited and to be the first on the disposal list.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think part of the drive there will be the work we're doing around skills and skills development. So, you know, that there's a real drive for us around working with our neat young people to make sure they've got the skills to access the opportunities. We've done some great programmes at Grange Waters. We will continue to do those. So when I focus on SEND, it's just because we do a lot of work with SEND. It's not all we do. You will know that. We do a lot of programmes working with our neat young people. We do apprenticeship programmes over there. We've got some fantastic stories of young people that have come through the apprenticeship route there as well. So, but I think it's important for us to anchor that and make sure that we get all of our systems in the right place. And I know I keep saying that, but that for me is phase one. We get that part right, then we can really fly and look what else we can offer, particularly as we think about what the future holds for us.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, Councillor, to your point that there'll be a number of resources across the council's footprint, including Grange Waters and other sites, that we'll need to consider in relation to devolution and reorganisation. And at the centre of the council, we are thinking about how we approach that in a meaningful way, based on evidence, and we're thinking about the programme we'll use to deliver that as we enter this period of both devolution and reorganisation. And so Grange Waters will be part of that wider consideration, and I'm sure we'll have conversations with the committee about that as that work develops.
Thanks, Patrick. Just following on from that, because I think it is a valid point. You're right what you say. You know, whatever new local authority Thurrock becomes part of, there will be a range of assets that will have to be looked at. I think the difference with this is it's not just an existing asset; it's an asset we're talking about spending quite a lot of money on in the near future. And I think the question I've got: do you not think it might be prudent to pause any investment in Grange Waters till we at least know? I mean, if we take Grange Waters as it is at the moment, it's already on the far fringes of the borough. It's on the far west of the borough. Whatever direction Thurrock expands into to become part of a new local authority, it's going to be. We're not going to expand towards London, thankfully. We're only going to expand into elsewhere into Essex. It's going to be even more remote. So, following on from what Councillor Houghton said, is it not prudent to perhaps wait and see, you know, what local government reorganisation looks like before we commit any funding to Grange Waters?
For me, I think now's its opportunity. I think when you think about the investment, we're looking at around sort of 70 odd K investment, and we're looking to bring in sort of a net sort of profit next year of 150K. I think to get in those systems will give us the best chance to really look at how we can drive forward sales, drive forward customer engagement, but actually, Councillor, more importantly, how we work with our local communities. It is not very easy for our local communities to book at the minute. We want to make that simpler. And I think for me, investing that money now would be a good investment because it enables us to really drive forward Grange Waters and put it in the best place possible to really make a difference for our communities. So, you know, you'd expect me to say that. I'm passionate about the business case. But I genuinely believe that, you know, I appreciate £70,000 is a significant sum. I don't disagree. But what we're saying is it already sort of breaks even and makes a small profit. And I think without those things, it will carry on as it's carrying on, but we will have missed an opportunity to get it into the place that will really drive it going forward.
Okay, thank you. I think our concerns in that regard are on record, so all of us want Grange Waters to succeed, but, you know, it's a very valid question I think that's been asked. Councillor Abbas and then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. Now, obviously, this is a brilliant asset. You know, we need a better booking system and a better marketing strategy. But looking at the current situation and future of our borough, and also looking at the current number of employees, the activities, we are capable of already doing 4,000 plus activities, which currently are around 1,000. So why do we need to spend 42,000 on a new employee?
We currently work on a system called the Plot. Again, when we get our new system, it should be a lot easier. What that will enable us to do is to maximise school holidays, evening work, weekend work. So by having the additional instructor, we'll be able to maximise the site. So at the moment, we're not able to do all the sessions we'd like to do. If we have another instructor, it is about maximisation, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I'm glad to see, I'm glad to hear certainly the wide degree of support that is being expressed for Grange Waters tonight. 2 years ago, when I was councillor for Bellis and took the question of investing in Grange Waters to full council, there was most definitely no will to develop it, and quite a strong will to sell it off. The drawbacks were emphasised, the difficulties, the lack of investment were all mentioned then. The conclusion reached was, we're better off selling it. I would like to point out that even then, even with those drawbacks and with a lack of identity that meant even local people didn't know it was there, it was still washing its own face, even then. Grange Waters has done a damn good job even when nobody was batting for it. Now that there is a will, I think investment makes sense. I think certainly prioritised investment makes sense. Clearly, marketing and a website must be top of your priority list because, as I'm aware, all right, it may be on the edge of our borough, but we've had clients at Grange Waters from well beyond the borough for years. I believe there's also been a link with the UK Paralympics using the pool. So it's succeeded even without these advantages. I think a case can be made to say with better marketing, with a website that makes it easier to engage with, then the ambition that you've shown in here is should be quite easy to deliver. And certainly if there is the will here to back Grange Waters, then even as part of it, very much, perhaps more so as part of a wider authority, what I see, for me, the point of investing now is to be able to say to that new authority, you have an asset here which is already delivering, which is capable of delivering even more, which is worth further investment. So for me, I think it's the right time, it's the right idea.
Thank you. Councillor Kerrin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. And aside from all the details in the report, it's just refreshing to hear the language around Grange Waters change because for more years than I can remember being on scrutiny committees, it's always, when Grange Waters has been mentioned, it's always been mentioned in terms of being like a burden, a problem to be dealt with, something to mitigate, and to actually see the change of language around how it's gone from being that to being an asset is really refreshing. And to be honest, I think the Chair made a really valid point about investing in it at this stage of this council's life cycle. However, whatever happens to Thurrock Council, the people of Thurrock will always be there, and our community, the council may be getting abolished, but our communities aren't. So I think it's worth putting the money in now to sort of, to boost it up to essentially secure its future beyond the lifespan of this council, and I applaud the business case and it has my full support.
Thank you. And Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing the proposal to us. I think it's about time that Grange Waters had its sort of time in the spotlight, to be honest. A lot of questions I've sort of had have already been asked, but I would just like, there's two things. Firstly, would like to say With regard to the timeline, it's obviously very important that we get it up and running and get everything, especially with the digital side and the bookings and the marketing, as soon as possible. Is there any danger of slippage, and how are we going to make sure, because we haven't really marketed it very well before, that we've got that, we are on track and getting it, hitting the right area, the right people with that? And also, would I might have missed this in the report, but is the Grangewater site still on the list of assets to be disposed of, or is that been removed now we are proposing to increase and invest in Grangewaters? Thank you.
So to answer your first question around timescales, we're confident once it's been through its approvals and the resource or the investment is approved, we will move quickly to get all the systems and processes in. We've been a bit cheeky, I guess, because we've purchased the domains, so we've got those already. We're ready to go once we get sort of approval. So I am confident actually that we'll be able to put those things in very, very quickly. We've got a demonstration on the industry-wide sort of system that we want to introduce. So giving a demonstration to staff have already seen it, but we want to get further into it now, councillor. So I'm confident once it's been given approval, we'll be able to move quite quickly. We absolutely have to, because for us to meet what we've put in this business case, we need to make sure it's up and running really, really quickly. I'm afraid I'm probably not in a position to answer about the asset disposal sort of list, so I'm going to hand over to another colleague if that's okay.
At the moment, it is still currently on the list of assets for disposal, but it's not anywhere, there's been no work done in terms of getting it ready for disposal. I've had several conversations with Rob Large, who leads that team, about Grangewaters, so since we took over in May, to make it clear that the steer from us as a new cabinet was that we wanted to look at how we were going to develop and maybe make some income out of Grangewaters. So even though it is still currently on the asset disposal list, there's no intention or any proceedings underway to dispose of that. And obviously we're investing in it, so that will be dealt with as we go down the list. I mean, at the moment we're looking at, and if we were going to move to disposal, it would have to all come through cabinet. So yes, it's still on there because it was on the list that we inherited. We will be rectifying that situation as we move forward with this investment, but it is there at the moment. But there's no worries around it being disposed. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. I just want to sort of emphasise, I think, to make a message clear to the public. If they see it on the disposal list, they're all going to think, well, you're not really serious. So I think if we're going to do this, and I know it's not my job to remove it from the list or anything, but I think to put it out there and to take it off and to make people aware it is no longer this. We are keeping this. This is a big opportunity, a big investment for us, and it's going to be a big generator of income for the council and benefit of the people of Thurrock. I think it would be a good stand to actually take it off, in my opinion, as soon as we can.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because of this, the council's unique financial position, that would probably have to be taken through Finance Recovery Board and through the commissioners before we do that. That's the only reason why it hasn't been done so far. But I absolutely take your point, and I will make a note to start that process. Thank you.
Councillor Cecil.
I may not be too well briefed, I apologise. How much of the marketing effort is going towards the residents?
The first stage of our marketing will always be our communities. This is a resource for our communities Clearly, we want to extend that to outside of the authority. We already get schools coming in from outside the authority, and that's one of the reasons that we've kept our prices where we've kept them, quite frankly, because we want to make sure that it is accessible, it is open to our local communities. So actually, our first tranche, for want of a better word, of marketing will be to our local communities. It's a really good point, because for many people I speak to, they go, oh, they've either not heard of it or they love it. It's really interesting with Grangewaters. They either really love it because they've used it in the past, or their child has, or someone, or, oh, what's that, not heard of that. So actually, we need to get that right, and we need to get that right first before we start thinking of sort of more wider marketing activities.
Yeah, I hope you look more at adults as well as the schools, because... Here we go. I hope you're looking more at adults as well. It's a broader scope. You sound too much towards education, and you've got to look at bigger targets.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there is work we need to do about sort of what our markets look like, what markets we're going to attract, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the other thing that we've looked at on numerous occasions, and I'm still keen to look at, is local businesses. Because, of course, what we could do is invite local businesses over. You could do a morning session doing what you need to do as your business, and then some team building stuff in the afternoon. So actually, I think there's a number of untapped markets for us. I think if we get where we need to get to, booking, marketing, all of that in place, then I think we'd like to do some targeted work with local businesses, because I truly believe there is a market there. As well as adults, of course. I mean, we do work with adults with learning disabilities, but actually, we do need to think of it.
The wider unwashed.
Well, absolutely, the wider group. I think one of the things, and one of the councillors picked up on it, is we're very keen to get the cafe sort of up and running. I mean, when I go over and do a bit of market testing, I'm always over, if I talk to people over there, they go, oh, it'd be really nice if I could just get a cup of tea. Or if you had a cake as well, and of course I'd be over there if there was a cup of tea and cake. So, as I said, I think that's the bit that I think will really attract people onto the site. So it is a point well made. This is a community resource. It's a community asset, and we need to treat it like that. We need to look at what we can do to enhance and develop it going forward.
Before we do, Councillor Abbas and then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Maldoni, can I just seek clarification, because you just mentioned you are remodifying the list of capital asset disposal list, and you are going to look into this. Can you confirm, are you suggesting you are removing Grangewater from capital disposal list?
I was responding to the request from somebody on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that obviously if we're going to invest in Grangewaters, it should be removed from the capital investment list. However, obviously, as you are aware, the asset disposal list forms part of our financial plans. So I can't just remove that myself. I haven't got the authority to do that. That will have to go through a procedure. But as I said to Councillor Kent, I've made a note of that to take that forward, because obviously it doesn't make sense if we're going to invest in Grangewaters and we're looking at making it an income generating service. It doesn't make sense for it to remain on the asset disposals list, but obviously I am not the decision maker on that. It will have to go through to the Finance Recovery Board, because it will have an impact on all the rest of our financial plans, because at the moment it's on that asset disposal list with a sort of an amount of money next to it which we're expecting to make in terms of the asset disposal. So I can't promise you that that's going to happen. I can promise you that I can take it forward and take it through that process, but ultimately, it will require Commissioner approval, and we will have to make a case for why we want to take it off that list. Hope that answers your question.
Yep, thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Fletcher and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just really to come back on Councillor Cecil's point. I mean,
as I say, I used to represent the local people around there, and it's vaguely depressing that so few of them knew about it. So, yeah, they are definitely a potential audience sitting there. But I would say, I suppose I totally get that you're saying it must be viewed primarily as a community asset. To be a source of investment, or to be invested in and to become successful, you're going to have to look at it in a very business-like manner. I think part of that business-like manner is identifying who your core, most likely targets are, and very much focus on them, because that's, and much though I'd love to see more of our local people using it, that's great. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be invited in, but I think one of the ways in which Grange Waters will really cement its position is building on the work it's done in education, building on the work it's done with providing services to other councils. And I think we just need to be very focused on deciding which are the core markets and go for those.
Thank you. So, Councillor Jones, then Councillor Fox, and I think we've given this a thorough airing after that.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that on page 38, number 8, not an option, not an option, do nothing, consider a commercial partner. We don't need to. We should have enough expertise within the council that can run this. You've already put forward a good business case. Surely we can run it, And also, let's keep it. We keep on saying about selling. This is something good for Thurrock when we're going through a bad time. Yeah. So something that can be put out there. Mike's right, we need to go further afield, but at least locally, something good for Thurrock for once. So I'm fully in favour, I really am. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Fox.
Good evening. Could it be looked at, because this looks like it's going to be a total success. So for Thurrock residents, could it be looked at of a discount for a yearly pass to Grange Waters?
I mean, all of those things will be considered. I mean, I think we need to get all of our processes in place. I've said that quite a lot, haven't I? But that's so important. We get that bit right, and then we can look at, how we're sort of bringing in new customers, new customer base and so forth. I mean, one of the things we looked at a while ago, interesting you talk about that, is a yearly pass. So we looked at, is there an opportunity to offer a yearly pass to Grange Waters? I think all of those things we can now explore and give some consideration to.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. It's, as you see, it is a subject of real interest to members. Thank you for coming. So it is a thorough business case, and I suppose the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, and it will be for us or future committees to look at this in more detail and see whether or not the spirit of the business case is being enacted. But thank you for presenting that. So we move on to item 10, which is the Corporate Plan Performance Management and Assurance Report, Quarter 2. Can I ask Sarah Brown and Patrick, please, to present this item?
Thank you. So this is our first report of performance aligned to our new corporate plan. The milestones and metrics demonstrate a commitment to our plan's priority objectives. We think it's a really great starting point towards transparency and accountability as required by the IRP. This data has been to SLT and Cabinet. In both forums, the discussions are really helpful to inform how performance needs to be improved. We've also been really pleased with the conversations that have been generated by this report in all parts of the council to consider stretching performance and how resources are best allocated. Included in the papers is a definition for each metric, and it's for your reference if required, but we can remove that, and that will make this report much more manageable for the future. We welcome the Commissioner's comments to give attention to those performance metrics which are not yet at target level, and we've invited colleagues here this evening to speak to that data if you have any questions regarding any of those. And we just want to point out that this is an iterative process. We will continue to develop and refine that process. Since this quarter was published, we've been working on gaps in the data. So you will see when the quarter 3 performance report comes forward that we've been working to reduce where there are gaps in the target and tolerance. That will help you more easily identify the direction of travel of performance. And we've also been working on a corporate metric library which is supporting data owners with quality assurance. The only other thing to say is thank you for your input previously when we were developing the milestones and metrics, and we welcome your feedback and points to help us understand how we can make the report more useful to councillors in the future.
Patrick, did you want anything?
Nothing to add, but happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Okay.
Chair, rookie mistake. The questions I've got really are more on the detail than on the overview. Are you taking questions on that at the minute?
Luckily, we have colleagues with us this evening from across the organisation who will be able to take questions on all aspects of the report. So very happy to take questions on kind of the process of this, but also we will brigade through this process. If you just bear with us about who will answer your question, we're very happy to take questions on the content.
So through you, Chair.
Yeah.
My main, basically, I was a bit of a broken record about this when I was last on the corporate ONS, and I'm doing it again. For me, one of the key elements of any kind of performance management setup is when you get to those ambers and reds, is okay, great. What are you going to do about it? What's the route to green? What I have to say is, looking through it, I'm quite pleased to see there are in a lot of cases, you know, there are routes to green. What we used to get was, oh, this is because. Well, frankly, that's no use to man or beast. It's good that you are starting to say, well, how we will get back to this, or I think in at least one case, because of the local development of the local plan, we probably can't do anything with one particular item. I thought, well, yeah, fair enough. If you can't actually improve on it, then say so. So, really pleased with that. I was going to... There's only actually one area where it occurs, and of course, typically I can't find it. But in, I think it was page... Give me a second. Yeah, page... well, 17. It's not really 17, is it? It's page 57. Looking at the metrics here within children's services, I think there are a number of different areas of red, and the one question I would ask is, off the basis of the information you've got here, are you looking at things like trends? Are there common factors that you think underlie these reds and therefore need to be dealt with in order to bring them back to green? That's eventually was my question.
Don't know if Michelle wants to take that question.
Yeah, so when you're talking about trends, clearly we benchmark across sort of Eastern region and national. I mean, we are looking at trends. I mean, we've got Elise here who will be able to answer some around the social care sort of side of it. If I pick up sort of a couple here maybe, and probably further down actually around the educational healthcare plans within 20 weeks. There is a national shortage of EPs. It's very very challenging to recruit EPs. We've managed to just recently recruit an EP who started with us, which is fantastic, but it is a very challenging market. We have brought in a number of locums. We've got a plan that is monitored fortnightly. So I'm monitoring that fortnightly to bring us back up to, you know, where I'd want us to be around that 20-week timescale. So I think we're clear where we need to get to. Some of these things, and it's interesting you said, Councillor, some of these things are a little bit outside our control. And clearly the national, not just local, the national shortage of EPs has been very, very difficult. However, we have got a plan it is monitored, because we want to bring that back, into the sort of levels that we enjoyed last year. So last year we were sort of in the 90% compliance around that, and we were delighted. Unfortunately, this year's been more challenging because in the summer we lost 3 of our EPs. They retired. So, as I said, so if that gives you some confidence, Councillor, we are monitoring this. We are making sure that we are looking at this sort of very, very regularly. And that's just one example. Elise, you've got yours, haven't you?
Yeah, I think in terms of it, it's a similar in terms of what we do with children. If we look at, for example, children looked after on the last day of the month who are placed more than 20 miles from their home. I mean, obviously that's a really significant one for us. And we do benchmark that, and we look at our statistical neighbours and the national and regional. And then what we do is we look at our, our fostering and our recruitment strategy and our commissioning. And I think we even look at more detail is that we have specific panels and meetings where we look at each individual child and those children at a distance and what their complexities are and how we can bring them closer to home. And then we go further in terms of looking at what that permanence looks like for those children. So some children we will actively bring back closer, and we do regular searches, and we have to report monthly on some children. And then for other children, if they are at a distance of 20 miles, but actually they're really settled and it's their family and it's their home, then we do an assessment about what's in their best interest about bringing them closer. So we the overview of these children is like individual.
Thanks for that, because I have to say what gives me great reassurance is that that's the kind of thing I'm wanting to see in these reports. For me, the only real advantage of a green, an amber, or a red is where there's a red, we know there's an issue. What are we doing about it? And you've given us there some real detail on what the issue is, what you're doing about it. That is all really I think we can ask of you, and that's great. That sounds good.
Yeah. And just to say on the back of that, I think I've made a note about when we respond to these, it's more about the how, because we've given some narrative, but we could give more detail on the how.
Thank you. Just a quick few questions from me. The report tells us that senior leadership team have been reviewing progress and discussing the direction of travel, albeit I know we're at a very early stage. Have they got confidence in the direction of travel? What are their observations on performance so far?
I would say I think we are SLT are pleased to be able to, and there are SLT colleagues around this table who I'm sure will be able to add to this, so I wouldn't want to answer for them. But I think senior leaders in the organisation are pleased to have all of this information in one place, to be able to have confidence in the way we have gathered the data, to have confidence in where that data has come from, and to be able to see across the organisation, as we can see here, where the colours are and the story that tells us about service provision. I think generally that does a couple of things. It allows us to have real conversations about resources, so where our own tolerances or our own targets might be above the national or particularly high. Why has that been a decision? Is that a decision that the council has made? And where there needs to be particular focus. I think that has allowed us to really think about how we marshal resources across the organisation. And I know particularly in corporate services, there's been conversations about the marshalling of resources when it comes to this data. I think what people are also interested in is having data kind of on a continuing basis. So people are looking forward to the Q3 data because it allows us to show some comparison in year. I think that will be particularly helpful. And looking forward, we're keen to see a whole year, but also keen to increase our levels of transparency when it comes to talking about the whole year with an annual report. So I think there's some general comments, but I would see if members of SLT who are around the table have anything to add.
Yeah, so thank you. So possibly as I think the most recent member of SLT here to arrive in Thurrock, I don't have the history. What I would say coming here in 3 months in is I welcome the performance management approach which is being adopted by the council. I can't comment on it previously, but it is familiar in many ways to what I've seen previously in a number of my other roles. I think it's clear and it's understandable, and it's tried to keep it quite simple, which is good. I really welcome in this the definition of the indicators, which I think helps for us to be able to explain, because sometimes there's a story to be told in what these indicators are actually saying. And I think, having that description of the indicators in the rear of the report allows, if there were any questions, for us to be able to explain exactly, to your point, Councillor, allows us to explain exactly why it might be showing amber or red, what the reason is, what we're doing about it, or what the justification is for it being red. And that can sometimes be the case. So I welcome the structure. I think that bringing in the performance management framework is something that we can all stand behind, and I think it helps us to work together as an SLT to share each other's performance, so we can approach it very much as one council and going forward and try to encourage further improvement.
Thank you. 5.1 of the report, it says that in formulating the corporate plan and the matrix and the milestones, you looked at best practice. Obviously, I don't expect you to go through chapter and verse. Can you just give us to sort of give that some context and to give us confidence? Can you tell us, give us some specific examples of how this plan how it reflects best practice and how you've gone about looking at best practice?
Yeah, thank you. So we looked at the LGA's guidance on performance management. We also looked at examples that they provide in case study form of good practice. And we also did some research across other councils on how they report their performance and allocate their performance. And we used that information to come up with several suggestions and ideas about how we might do that, taking that to SLT for discussion. So that's the basis of the research, really.
Just one thing to add there, Chair, thank you, is that you can always look at your geographical neighbours when it comes to this kind of work, and that is helpful. The other thing to say is that CIPFA have a very useful tool, which is about your comparative nearest neighbour based on population, deprivation, various aspects, and we have an accepted pool of comparator nearest neighbours. And so while we also looked geographically across the region, we were also able to conduct that work with our CIPFA comparative neighbours, which allows us to look at other unitary authorities around the country and not just be tied down to our regional neighbours. Although in this case, our regional neighbours did have some good examples, particularly on the reporting. So we've used a combination of both.
Thank you. It's reassuring. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just make one other observation? And I recognise absolutely why councillors would want us to focus on the reds and what we're doing to try and improve performance in those areas. But one thing I would stress is part of the performance management framework, I think, has to be that there will be some ambers and reds in there. If we just present a sea of green, I think the argument would be that we're not really very stretching, we're not really challenging ourselves and trying to improve. And so I think it's right there should be a balance. And sometimes I think, not tonight, but possibly maybe an interesting conversation to look at not just the reds and the ambers, but also look at some of the greens and what we're doing really well and why that's happening. So I think it's about giving a balance to the whole scorecard. But I think you do want to see that kind of balance reflected.
Thank you. That actually brings me on to my next point very nicely, because 94% of the milestones are are green. One of the points I made at the very start, and I do understand it's very early days, but let's be blunt, we're a failing council. There are lots of things we do very well. Adult social care is one of them. But one of the observations I made at the very start was that when we start to see the reporting, we see lots and lots of green, then we've set them too low. And I suppose for me, I was really surprised to see that sea of green and only 1% of indicators red. This doesn't feel like a plan that is really stretching the council or really testing us to the limit. It's just we're doing very well, and we know we're not. Let's be frank about it. That's why we're in intervention. It's not just about the financial situation of the council. How is it possible that at this early stage so many are green and just 1% are red?
So I absolutely take your point, Chair, and it's a useful one to be able to discuss in this forum. So I think we have to think about where we've used metrics. That's about performance, and where we've used milestones. That's about finishing tasks we said we would finish in a timely manner, and so. I think we have to appreciate that these timelines have been set by colleagues across the organisation in line with the resources they have to deliver those, and they've thought about those resources when they've thought about the timelines. Of course, the time that has passed between the reporting and where they are on those programmes at the moment is also very short because this is the first round. I think that because there are pockets of failure, I think the people have considered how stretching the milestones are based on those resources they have, and I will be most interested to compare the Q2 data to the Q3 data on the milestones as we see the impact of all this work that's going forward with all the things that we know are stretching colleagues across the council. So while I take the point, I think we have to understand the time aspect of milestones and the performance aspect of metrics, and we have to come back to our assessment of the milestones when we've got a slightly longer time frame, and without wanting to be pessimistic with the committee, I wouldn't expect to see such a sea of green when we're 3 months further along with milestones, given how stretched colleagues are.
Okay, also my only concern there was if we do start to see more and more red creeping in, does that not then paint a picture that as an authority we're going backwards? Am I being naive in expecting to have seen more red at this early stage and to see that the trend improving, if we are an improving council, rather than to see a sea of green and as time goes on we see more and more falling into red? Does that not project a picture that actually we're going backwards? If that happens, we have all these green indicators, and in the next quarter we see more falling into red or amber. That's going to send a message that actually we're going backwards, is it not?
I think I was trying to illustrate that there'll be more time in the future where it is possible that timelines have slipped. Of course, officers will always work to ensure that timelines do not slip, given that there is more time. I think I was trying to explain that there'll be more opportunity for slippage. I apologise if I gave the impression that that was moving backwards. I think we have to understand, as we've said about reds and ambers in other cases, an amber in this case does not mean that progress has not been made and we are not improving. An amber in this case means that progress is not at the speed we would have liked at the beginning of the year. And so I think we need to consider how we are looking at progress. We should always be moving forward. And I think the milestones help us to marshal whether we're moving forward at the speed we anticipate. If we're not moving forward at the speed we anticipate in the next round of reporting, I would expect senior officers and SLT to want to make changes to those programmes to ensure that's not the case, and it's about taking action on those timelines.
Thank you.
Possibly if I could just comment, because I don't have any baggage because I haven't been here for a long time. I would say that without rehearsing the reasons for the council being an intervention, the services that I've seen coming in across place, people, children's environment, etc. I think, from my personal experience of working elsewhere, compare very favourably, and there's a lot of good service delivery which has always been in place, and certainly that's the case in adults as well as in children's and in place. And I think it's important to recognise that, for the reasons the council it has the challenge it has, the services have always tried to really do their best, and I think that's recognising in how they're benchmarked nationally. In a lot of cases. So it may be that we flip it the other way, because if I was to talk to you, if you were to ask me about direct payments, which is one of the reds on adult social care, I'd say that, if I'm honest with you, I think you're a little bit harsh on yourselves here. The performance last year was 30% on direct payments the performance to date is 28% in this year. It was 27% in Q1, so it's lower than the outturn last year. But Q2 has improved by 1%. And if you look at our performance on direct payments, we're still 2 and 4% above the regional and national benchmarked average. So we're still performing quite well. So I think, we need to recognise, and sometimes for staff, it's really good to, as long as we don't get complacent as the leaders and the management, it's actually good for staff to see that there's some recognition for how they benchmark into performance-wise. Actually motivates them with the journey they've been through here. It's really good for them to see that actually their services they're delivering are still quite good. So it gives us something. It gives us gives them an incentive to carry on. So I think it has to be seen in that balance.
Thank you. Are there any questions from other members? No? Okay.
Can I just ask some clarification?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you for your report. Just on, obviously we always, even initially someone said about these report, in-time report and report writing, and we had a lot of discussion on quality of report writing. But here we can see, this is a number of officers completing report writing training, so it's amber. So obviously this is the first, I think, you are just starting to monitor this. So can you please clarify this? Page 10.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Again, you can see there that there were 14 colleagues who did that training in Q2. While that might be slightly behind the target over the quarters, of course, there's been no training in Q1, and so we would expect to see those numbers increase at a rate higher later in the year, because of the way the work is loaded across the year. For example, I attended that training, but I attended that training probably in the next quarter to be reported, and so I would expect to see, and we have a conversation when that data comes. We should expect to see on this particular metric later loaded work to bring us to that target number by the end of the year.
Just another question on page 17. Obviously we have seen a lot of greens when it comes to budgeting or these kind of things, but when it comes to actual service delivery or to children, so it's mostly these are red. So for instance, the children or in education is red and is worse, and then care leavers is getting better, but then children looked after. Obviously, I understand there have been issues in terms of properties, nearby boroughs. So can you please explain how are there good chances of improvement in near future or next quarter?
I think colleagues in children's.
Are you referring, Councillor, to the
page 17,
the foster care at a distance?
Yeah, the placement and the distance and the not in education children.
Yeah, so in terms of I'll talk about the placement. So in terms of the placements, we have a recruitment fostering strategy, and also we work with Foster East. And Foster East works with 11 other local authorities in terms of recruitments of fostering. They create hubs, they create training, and we share material with them in order to attract foster carers to Thurrock. So we have a whole recruitment strategy that we have published. So in terms of that, yeah, we're working really hard to make sure that we have sufficiency for our children in order that they can live close to home. So, and the other one that you were talking about is, so there's the average weekly cost of placements. Is that one that you're referring to that's red? So with that one is that we have a number of our children in foster care who have a reason, their cost is reasonable. That's what I want to say, it's reasonable. However, we have a very, very small proportion of children with quite significant complex needs, and the cost for those children is significantly higher. So what happens then is that pushes the overall average cost up. what we do is we have, and as I referred to earlier, so we have different types of panel, but we have a specific panel where we look at high cost placements of children, where we review their needs, their package, their therapeutic intervention, and then we look at how that we can transition and step down those children. And we do that monthly, and we look at the top 10 with our senior managers. Without our senior managers, we look at the children below that as well. And that has proved effective because those numbers and those children do change. And where we've had significantly high costs for some of those children over a period of time, that we've been able to bring that down, maybe half it, where we've been able to meet their needs with the care plan. And also in terms of our commissioning, we're exploring developing better value block contracts with a small number of local providers. So what we're trying to do is develop our relationship so that when they have availability, they come to Thurrock first, because obviously there's children throughout the country who want placements, and we have a lot of children placed in Thurrock as well with providers. So we're trying to develop those relationships so that they're trusting and they come to us. So there's lots of work around commissioning. We are updating our sufficiency strategy in the next 3 months as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I just want to come back briefly to that question of report writing. I think there's a danger here, and it comes up often in performance management sort of matrices or whatever, of confusing the means with the end. People aren't better at reports because they've been on the training. I say this as I was a trainer since when I had hair, and just because I've trained somebody to do it doesn't guarantee he's going to go away and do it in real life. So for me, I would be looking to see something like how many of those managers have since produced a report and had it reviewed for things like clarity, plain English, persuasiveness. That tells me more about whether they're hitting their straps.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you very much for the opportunity to expand on this point, because this is something I wanted to cover in my last response and didn't. I think what's really helpful for a counselling intervention, excuse me, is that we've got numbers and facts and figures in this reporting, and then alongside it you have the improvement and recovery plan reporting. And actually, what we're looking at there, and why you should be looking at this in the round when we consider the civic calendar for years to come, you will see that data side by side, because what that qualitative data is focused on is the outcome. We know that there are particular outcomes of the intervention that this work is bringing us to. This report has a task in showing you the metrics and milestones, the raw numbers about the actions that officers are taking. The improvement and recovery reporting and plan has a role in demonstrating to you, to commissioners and to the government, that work we are reporting on is having the outcome on the impacts is having an impact to deliver the outcomes we've said we will deliver as part of the intervention.
Thanks, Patrick, but I actually believe that the outcomes and the impact are what should be on any reporting. The actions that you take, great. Obviously, if you hadn't taken the action, things would be as they were. But the outcomes and the impact, if it's possible to put that qualitative data in, that's what tells us that things are working better than they were.
And it's an incredibly helpful steer, and we can look at this metric and others to ensure that you're not just looking at counts of numbers, but you're looking at the impact of that training. We'll take that away, and we can refresh it in further versions of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Just some quick questions for me on the actual data itself, if I can. Just on page 8. Staff sickness, the target is 9 days. Last quarter was 10.9 days, but that's green. Why is that green?
Can I bring Liz in on that one?
Sorry, Chair, could you repeat the question for me?
Staff sickness level is something that I think Thurrock has always struggled with. Our target is an average of 9 days.
Yes.
Last quarter there were 10.9 days.
Yes.
So that's shown as green. Should it not be red or amber? that would suggest we're hitting our target of 9 days, when at the last quarter there was more staff sickness than we were aiming for.
I can answer that.
Oh, sorry.
When we designed the metrics, we asked services to tell us what their tolerance was for performance. So we need to be better explaining that target is actually more likely to be a tolerance between two numbers. So we'll give a better indication of that, but I suspect that is what that relates to. So whilst it's not 9, it's within their tolerance of what they're happy with at this moment in time. But when it gets to a point, it will tip into the amber. But we will find a better way of explaining that in the report.
Okay. Let's hope so, because I'm still not clear, but thank you. Okay, moving on. Just quickly in relation to street cleanliness. I have no idea what they mean. Street cleanliness, a litter, 3 times a year. Can you give us some interpretation of that? I'm not sure what we're measuring or what that really means.
I'm hoping, Councillor, that my colleague Tony can. Yeah, I'm just bringing it up. Yeah, no problem.
It's street cleanliness, litter, detritus and graffiti. Those 3, I don't know what they mean or what we're even measuring.
To get you a real detailed response, I'd need to speak to the service, but there's those 3 particular metrics of what the Clean and Green service has to report on statutory. Every time that they go out to clean certain sites, they will kind of rate. It used to be an external company that rate, but they'll rate the cleanliness of the area when they first get there. I'm not doing a very good job explaining this, am I?
I'm just concerned that if we don't understand it and it can't be explained to us like clearly and coherently, what hope is there for people outside the organisation to understand it? Obviously, as a corporate overview Scrutiny committee, it's probably not. The temptation is to drill down and ask lots of questions on individual ones, and we need to try and resist that to a degree. Our job is to look at the thing sort of holistically, but there are ones that jump out that I think we do have to ask questions on. And what I'm not clear on is, so street cleanliness, litter, 3 times a year. 3 times what a year?
Yeah.
The following one, detritus and graffiti, it just says 3 times a year. Previous year outturn 14.57. 3 times what a year? 14.57 of what? I've got no idea what they mean.
Is that still on?
Page 36.
Yeah, so in terms of the 3 times a year, the statutory return is that they send reports back 3 times a year rather than quarters. So that's what the 3 times a year refers to.
If it's helpful, councillors, on page 36,
36.
on
Yeah,
page
sorry.
36 of the report, there is a definition of this particular metric. It shows that there are 3 reporting periods, and there are definitions of detritus and litter. You'll see also that this is a DEFRA indicator. It's a helpful thing to raise that this is particularly unclear, and we will do some work in the next iteration to make sure that this is explained both in plain English but also in the way that it relates to the public spaces in Thurrock.
Thank you for that. And then just some quick questions around refuse collection, if I can. Percentage of household waste sent for recycling, 30%. That's green. But we know that Thurrock is dreadful at recycling, because in the benchmark it tells us that we're 311th out of 343. What I'm not clear, it tells us it's almost a statement of fact. It tells us we're hovering around 30%. But how do we measure whether that's good or bad? It's green, but it's 30%. Is that, how have we come to the conclusion that 30% equals good, when actually our record is quite bad?
I don't know if Tony, you have anything to add on how the team came to that target?
Yeah, so in terms of the target, we was looking at the last few years in order to put a target in place. I mean, we've had this discussion as well in terms of how we should have set the target. Should it be based on previous years? Should it be based on ambitions? For this particular one, we based it on the previous years, but clearly that's something that we might want to consider for future years and targets. Because, yeah, as I say, that was based on kind of previous years rather than particularly what our ambitions as a council are in terms of recycling.
I mean, obviously, how we deal with waste is, you know, it's a major issue. You know, all of us want to be cleaner, greener, and all that tells me is that we recycle 30% of our waste. It doesn't tell me why we've arrived at that figure or why it's green. And yet, when I look at a benchmark, and it says we do dreadfully. A bit the same as the following, the residential waste per household, all that, that's really just a statement of fact. It just tells us how much waste we send to landfill or incinerate, I presume. It doesn't, I'm not clear why those figures equal green, particularly when I look at the benchmarking, which tells us we do really badly. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, they should be red, because when we're a local authority, that's one of the worst in the country for recycling. How we can then have a green rag rating, that just seems a contradiction in terms. Again, so perhaps that's something you can go away, have a look at, and give us some more feedback on. It just seems bizarre to me that as an authority that does so badly when it comes to recycling, and so badly in terms of how much waste we send to incineration or landfill, that we find ourselves as green.
Very happy to come back on that, but where Councillor Muldooney's keen to come in.
Yeah, can I sort of, I think we need to remember that there's financial situation that we're in. So I think you're wrong about that indicator. I think it's absolutely right. It is green because the target is 30% in line with what's happened in previous years. But when we're looking at the council as a whole at the moment, we have to take into account how ambitious can we be on making improvements when our main priority is to bring the council back to financial sustainability. So, you know, we're only just over 2 years on from being a week away from not being able to pay our staff and not being able to deliver our services. So I think we need to be sensible. I understand what you're saying, but I think you're making a false conflation. They have reached that target because the target was 30%, and they've reached that target. I agree it's not an ambitious target. However, we do need to be mindful about the financial situation that we find ourselves in and be reasonable about what we can actually achieve within the very, very tight financial constraints that we've got. So I hope that's useful in sort of understanding the bigger picture and why, you know, we've had to be sensible and services have had to be sensible, because remember, we're having to deliver year-on-year cost savings as part of our financial plan. So there's no point having an overly ambitious target which A, we're going to fail, and 2, is going to stretch already stretched services to the point of breaking. And as someone who has staffing within my portfolio, HR, I'm very, very aware that capacity is a real issue within the council. So I absolutely take your point. It's not an ambitious target in terms of recycling, and we historically haven't done well at recycling and increasing recycling rates. But also we need to think about, is this the moment to be pushing our ambitions on recycling, or is it more important actually to be concentrating our attentions on bringing the council back into a place of financial sustainability?
I've got to respectfully disagree with you in the strongest possible terms there, because this is not just about the financial position of the council. You know, what that implies to me, that because we're a failing council, it's okay to list things as green when they're not good, because we're not, you know, we don't want to overburden ourselves. this isn't about finances. It's about recycling. We have a blue bin collection system. It's just residents aren't using it. No amount of money is going to change that. I'm sure that's not the only reason we do very badly, but recycling levels have been falling for a while because residents, for whatever reason, are choosing to not recycle waste as they should be. That's got nothing to do with the financial position of the council. We're using that as an excuse. These are about services which the first issue is 30%, how do we arrive at it? That's a reasonable question for to be a corporate overview and scrutiny committee to ask. What is that 30% based on? I've heard it's what we achieved in other years. We know that's dreadful, but we're going to put it green anyway because we're a council that hasn't got much money. That really sends a chill down my spine if that's the kind of thinking around some of these indicators. Just saying, well, 30% is what we achieved in past years. We know it's dreadful because the benchmarking tells us we're dreadful, but because we're bankrupt, we'll show it's green, we're doing really well. That really sends a chill down my spine, as I said, if that's the thinking around. I hope this is an isolated one, I'm sure it is. But I just think that if that's the thinking, that we'll list things as green because we're a council in intervention, even though all the evidence shows us that we're dreadful compared to other local authorities and have a terrible track record and have for many, many years, and we're actually going backwards when it comes to recycling, not going forward, but we'll list it as green. We're not in a very good place, are we? But I've made the point now, I hear what Councillor Aldoni said, but you cannot possibly use the council's financial position to somehow use this as an excuse when we know we're doing really badly. Our job as a committee is not, I think, to go through line by line and drill down on them. Ones like this really should be referred back, I suppose, to the appropriate committee. But where you've got things like this, potentially it shines a light on the whole process. It's right to pick them out and just ask, because there are others, how have we arrived at that figure? How have we arrived at that figure in classic green when we know we're doing so badly? And we hope that's an isolated incident. It's not something that runs all through the corporate plan measurements. I'm sure it doesn't. But I think what might be helpful is if we perhaps ask the relevant overview and scrutiny committee to look into that in a bit more detail. That's one of the things we're asked to do. I think we just need some assurance that we're not listing things as green when the target, how we've arrived at that target isn't clear, and we know we're doing very badly. It's just a contradiction in terms. We're doing something dreadfully as a council, but we'll list it as green. So perhaps we can ask the relevant corporate overview and scrutiny committee to look in at in a bit more detail. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. I know you feel very, very, very passionate about this, but I do disagree with, I think the target says 30%. So the data says that we've got the 30%. The target and the benchmark are different things. I think maybe the target maybe needs to be looked at again if we go, because obviously we do want to improve the benchmark with where we're compared with all the other authorities in the country. We want to get back up to improve, so we're not down at the lower quartile of those authorities. But the target set in the report was 30%. They've met the target. So although you might disagree with the low level of the target, to say that it should be red, I think is totally incorrect because they've met the target. If there is a failure in that part, maybe the target should have been set higher. Maybe the target wasn't quite as ambitious enough as it should have been in the first place.
Yeah, I think that is the point. The point is, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier, is that we as a committee have to have confidence that these indicators, these targets, are stretching the authority. They're not just, for want of a better word, a tick box where we set quite unambitious targets so that they are green. That's not really why we're doing this. It is to improve the services that we provide across the whole of the council and know where we're not doing very well. And this is just an example of where we've set sort of an arbitrary target which is based on the failings of the service previously, and we're rating it as green. I'm not saying that the target hasn't been met. It clearly has been met, but it just calls into question why we have indicators as green when we know as a council we're failing. I think that's all. No one's saying we haven't met the target, but it is a problem with how we've arrived at that target, and it begs the question: are there other examples throughout this where we've set targets which, of course, they're going to be green because we're saying that failure is good. So I'm not saying that should be read because we haven't met our target. What I'm saying is I'm concerned that target is so low, and it's an example of something shown as green when quite clearly the benchmarking tells us we're one of the worst in the country. It's a problem with how we're doing it, and it's just, I'm not saying that it's factually wrong. I'm just saying there's, I think, a problem with how we've arrived at that. And it does beg the question, is that why we've got so many that are green? It's right that we probe those questions. It's not a criticism, but we do have to ask those difficult questions.
I think it's absolutely right that you ask those questions. I think that is why we bring data of this kind to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think it is incredibly helpful for you to ask these questions. I think I would say in response to your question that what the data library allows us to do is go back and see how those targets have been reached. The data library has that information. I think what we're also able to do is go back and look at the benchmarks where there is a ranking and just and double check on the ranking and the target in each of those examples, and we can come back to the committee directly on those points to provide some assurance when we've undertaken that work.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Where I agree with the Chair is that the failure to be ambitious completely invalidates the whole process. I totally agree on that. However, I think there is, where we're perhaps talking at cross purposes, I think, this process is about setting targets and meeting them. If the target is too low and it gets met too easily, you raise it. And what I'd expect to see is a step. So that's one thing. Secondly, I'm not sure we're necessarily talking unambitious here, we're talking realistic. Now, I mean, we mentioned blue bin collections, and they're a key, they're not the only element in recycling success, but they're a key part of it. Councillor Muldowney, you've got responsibility for this. How do you think some of the changes that have happened in the last year or two have impacted our ability in terms of what's realistic, what's possible, what impact, how have the reductions in collections, etc., impacted our ability to recycle, and are we saying that 30% is about all we can hope for?
I can't really speak to place because that's not my area, but certainly financially there have been reductions to the blue bin collections. As we all know, it's 2 weekly. There was a plan at one point that we were going to be keeping the blue bin collections weekly, and that perhaps a move to 2 weekly green bin collections would then help to drive up recycling rates, and we were discussing that sort of back before the disaster came to light. But obviously, as part of various savings programmes, which we have to do financially, and this is where I do have to disagree with the Chair, that this has nothing to do with the financial position. The financial position affects everything that we do across the council. We are having to make cost savings across the council in order to achieve our financial plans, which we all agreed and signed up to. So I think it's not that it's a lack of ambition. I agree with you. It's about being realistic. And realistically, we've only got 2 weekly blue bin collections, and we're not going to be able, as far as I'm aware, to be able to reinstate weekly blue bin collections. So that means that driving up recycling rates is quite complicated. Certainly for me personally, I fill up my blue bin and I have to get in there and squash it all down. There is no more room in my blue bin for recycling on a 2 weekly collection. And anybody who does recycle properly, that you get to that level. I mean, I do what I can to squeeze it all in there, and sometimes I ask neighbours to use their bins. But even if households are recycling to the best of their ability, we have that hard ceiling, and that is absolutely because of the financial situation. So I agree that we do have to be realistic, but we will always try and be ambitious within that. And I do think it's right to raise it, and I think it's certainly something that we'll feed back and we will look at.
Just to give, I think that's exactly where I'm sort of coming from. You know, 90% is probably totally beyond anybody's ability, and let's not bother. If you're hitting 30% and it's green, 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 then you know you can do 30% and you can probably do more. For me, the picture that I need to see is the dynamic picture. You know, okay, if there's 95% greens, I'd want to see some tighter goals set next time round, and the fact that there then might be 80% greens rather than 90%, I wouldn't see as a step backwards. Well, at least what I'd hope for is it's because you'd be telling us, yeah, well, we've moved our goalposts upwards. You know, I would hope certainly that we wouldn't say, well, okay, 30% is what we managed in the past. That's all we're going to do. That's the point at which this is invalidated for me.
Chair.
Yep, Councillor Jones.
Chair, it's a bit confusing this, but I suppose when I used to be on chairs cleaner and greener before, our benchmark and anything like this used to be up against other councils and where we were in the recycling league table, should we say. And to be fair, we was never any good at it. And we was absolutely abysmal on our recycling. I'm going back 10 years, 8 years. It used to be, that's how it's always been. And we tried different methods. And I suppose the way you've got to judge this now is that you've got to do it within the resources you've got. So where our benchmark was, say, we come down there, 3/4 down in the league table with collections every week. Now you've got collections every fortnight. So it's to work that comparison now with the resources that you've got. Yeah. But, you know, that's our benchmark used to be up against other councils, how we was doing. And that's the way I can't still look at it, but I know we've got to adjust a little bit to live to sort out how we are with the resources we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As I said, this can't become a debate about refuse collection.
No.
We're not the right committee. But as I'm chair, I will come back because, again, using our financial situation as an excuse is not acceptable, because we may have moved to fortnightly recycling collection, but of course you can leave 2 clear bags of side waste next to your brown bin, your blue bin, sorry. So and we were also told that by going to fortnightly green bin collections, it would drive up recycling, and they're the questions we have to ask. We were told these measures would help drive up recycling, and the question is that it hasn't. But fortnightly recycling is the norm in many councils. It's not unique to Thurrock at all, and actually we're very liberal in the fact that we allow people to leave 2 clear bags of side waste, so there should be no difficulty for residents to recycle. They can recycle as much as ever before. But I think we can put this to bed now. We've done. We can't let this become a debate around the refuse collection service, because this is not the right committee. It's about how that data and how we've collected that data and how we arrived at that target reflects on the wider strategy, if you like. That was where I was coming from, but it's sort of descended, which is fine, but it's descended into, bearing in mind we've got time constraints, it's descended into that particular service. It isn't the right place to focus on that. But Councillor Cecil, did you want to?
Yeah, but I think I've listened to what you said and I've backed off.
I'm sure we are all mightily disappointed on that front. But moving on, thank you everybody for your contributions. Thank you for your presentation, all the officers who contributed to that. We'll go to the recommendations. We're asked to review the attached reports and make comments and recommendations to Cabinet. I think, you know, we've comment. I don't think we need to make. I haven't heard any suggestion that we make any specific recommendations to Cabinet. But we note the information, and in terms of asking other overview and scrutiny committees to look at some of the data, I will say I don't think the best way for this to work is for us to refer stuff back to committees, because that does require us to then, you know, go through this perhaps in a level of detail that we don't need to as a corporate overview and scrutiny committee. I would just ask that we actually give some consideration to those those indicators, those bits of this that are relevant to those committees, asking the chairs whether they would like to see them anyway, because I think for putting the onus on us to sort of, as a committee, to refer things back, does perhaps require us to do what I've just done and go through some of these things line by line and ask these kind of questions. Well, we need to remain more focused on the direction of travel as a whole rather than specific indicators, specific things in there, if that makes sense. But happy to have a discussion that, you know, private more about that. But I do think that the individual committees should be looking at their respective areas as a matter of course anyway. That's just my suggestion. Okay, moving on then to item 11, Revenue Capital Budget Monitoring Report, Quarter 2, 2024-25. Seema, is that you? Do we wait for people to leave before we take this item?
Sorry to interrupt, but did you vote on the recommendations?
We've gone through the recommendations. I don't think it requires a vote, to be honest. I've gone through the recommendations. I'm satisfied that we've noted the report, we've commented on it. There's nothing to refer back to Cabinet, but we have asked, I've made a recommendation in respect of other ONS committees looking at the data, but I don't think we need to go for a formal process of voting on the recommendations.
Chair, in the interest of time, I suggest we don't go through the slide pack and instead I just take questions, if that's okay. There are slides and that summarises the quarter 2 position, or I'm happy to go through a few of the slides. Up to you, Chair.
To be honest, I'm going to leave it to you. It's up to you to present us the information. However you think. I mean, we've all read the report, I hope, but it will be guided by you. We've still got roughly an hour, but
okay, I'll go through a couple of the slides which are high level then.
Could I just on that point, just to make, we've seen the advice today that we received via email. What we're not going to do at this committee is do things on the quick in order to meet that very prescriptive deadline. If we get to that 9:30 and there's items that we haven't dealt with, that's for other people to worry about how we then do it. But we're not going to rush through things on the quick because we've been told there's a very strict deadline we have to meet. So if that helps, you take all the time you like. Thank you.
Okay, Chair. Committee, so the quarter 2 position revenue, general fund revenue position is a net forecast position of 1.89 million overspend against the current budget of 68.5 million. The service position at quarter 2 is a very slight reduction against the quarter 1 position, 348k reduction. So it is moving in the right direction, and the overall position is 209k, and that is after taking in all of the funding that is available to the council. I'm going to go into a few of the high-level slides before I take questions. So that is the position on adult social care and health. And it is an underspend position, so I won't go into too much detail on adult social care and health, and a very slight reduction on the quarter 1 position. Next slide. And the movement has come about on adult social care and health because of external placements, and we've taken out the winter pressures funding that was originally in the quarter 1 forecast. And the slides then show the data on activity, showing client numbers, and they are in the main report for you to look at your leisure. I won't go on to the next slide, which is Assistant Chief Execs, but I will concentrate on children's services. So Children's Services is showing an overspend position. It is 534k at quarter two, but it has come down from the quarter one position by 466k. The main reason for the pressures is complexity of placements. It is not client numbers. They are increased on the overall budget. However, the increase from quarter one to quarter two is that increase in complexity, as you have heard on the performance data as well. Those increasing complexity is rising to increasing costs in fees and support, and that is increasing the actual costs that are coming through in the placement fees. And school transport, there is a reduction actually with a new tendered contract from September, so we're seeing a reduction. And with the DSG, we are finding that there's pressures with the increasing EHCP, Education, Health and Social Care plans. Next slide. The data. Go back one more. Yeah. So what this slide shows, that's in the main report, is they're showing graphs on the actual placement types and the placement costs. And you can quite easily see that we're not actually seeing pressures apart from external fostering and internal fostering, and the placement types very clearly showing where those pressures in complexity are coming through. And home to school transport, that reduction that's coming through with the new transport routes from September. Next slide, please. And that is very clearly demonstrated in the actual reductions that the increases that we're seeing, but then the reductions offsetting from home to school transport. Next slide. Corporate services has actually seen an increase, so it's currently 1.18 overspend on the budget, and there is an increase from quarter one. That has been due to dual running and inflation pressures, and there's also stop oil legal costs that are being incurred, so we have had to put that into the forecast. And then I'm going to move quite quickly forward. Keep going. That's finance. I'm going to do some narrative on the savings place. So place, what we're seeing is the pressures coming through with that temporary accommodation. So the homelessness pressure, primarily 2.1 million overspend. There is no movement from quarter one. However, the resulting pressure that was explained at quarter one on the temporary accommodation is still being seen. Next slide. So what you can see very clearly in that slide is the temporary accommodation placements, the net nightly let accommodation. That graph clearly shows the upward movement on those placements. Next slide. And again. And again. Right. So we've done quite a lot of work on the savings tracker to mitigate the pressure at quarter two. And there has been quite a substantial move in the realisation of the savings between quarter two and quarter one. If you go to the next slide, that clearly shows it. So where you will see, we had deep dive meetings with each directorate, and the RAG status at quarter two has clearly moved between quarter two and quarter one. So a lot of work has been done on the savings at quarter two. And we're currently working with all the directorates on their quarter three report, which will come to Cabinet, and all the corporate overview and scrutiny in March as well. And I'll take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. It looks like we're moving in the right direction. Are we on track for the savings we want to make over the whole year?
For the savings, there are still some that are red, and they will be added on to the 25-26 savings for delivery. So directorates will be expected to deliver those savings. One is direct debits in adult social care, And in your report, you will see those 5 savings that are red that will be added to 25-26.
So are we looking at any mitigation elsewhere for those undeliverable savings, or will it be a case of we will reach our target but for those undeliverables?
So Maxime is correct. So what we've got in terms of the red savings, we've got 2 of the most chunky elements of those savings are ones where we are saying that they're just slippages this year. So Seema's quite right. They will all tip onto the... Because what we have to do, if we've got an unachieved saving, we either take it out of the budget or we slip it and it'll be delivered in future years. So the 2 chunky ones are ones where we think that they are just a delay this year and they will be materialised in full next year. So we will take them. We'll just put them onto the savings tracker, which Seema and her colleagues will pick up next year. There are a couple quite small ones, and I confess one of them's in my area. It's about vacancy management that will tip forward again into next year, and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But the majority of it is slippage, and I'm confident we can get them delivered in full next year, and we might just have a few residual ones.
So in effect, part of our targeted savings this year will slip into next year?
Yeah, we will carry those reds forward into next year. And as I say, I'm confident that, or hope, as confident as we can be, that a big chunk of that, it's about 400,000, isn't it, Seema? I can't remember, will be achieved. And then the ones that where we hope to do them, but we might struggle a little bit more, but we'll be very transparent about the reporting on them.
Thanks. I mean, the reason I'm sort of going over that and back over that is that what that suggests is that we're cutting what we can. If something becomes unachievable, there isn't really anything we can do elsewhere to mitigate the effect. Is that correct?
To be fair, what we have done this year is, and Seema can remind me of the value of it because I haven't got a copy in front of me, is as we've been going through the year, if we have got savings where services are just not able to do them, they have put up mitigations. So on the tracker, that's white, and I think we've got just under £1 million, Seema. Is it up on there?
Yeah, so is one of the slides.
So we do say, wherever possible, if you can't make your saving, you have to come up with a mitigation. So really when we've got, I think it's 680 something is red out of a total of 20 million. From my perspective, I think that's good.
Any other questions? Okay. Just coming back, I mean, the savings that are in red, we know they're undeliverable. I suppose really, in that case, attention needs to really be more on those that are at risk, so that those undeliverables don't grow. We've accepted that the undeliverables are not going to be delivered. How confident are we that that unachievable column is not going to grow? I accept that you can't give a definitive, you can't guarantee they're not, but how can you assure us as a committee that really sufficient focus is now on those at risk categories to stop that undeliverable growing even more?
I mean, I haven't got a crystal ball, so I can't say I can't say with definitely. But what I can assure you of is Seema and her team, along with very good engagement from the directorates. So Rob attended his session, and other people attended theirs. And the one for corporate has been rescheduled, hasn't it? Done a very, very deep dive on all the savings, and we are very challenging with the directorates in that we only say the savings. Look, Rob's shaking his head saying yes, they are. We only accept that it's achieved when there's absolute evidence. So if you revise the contract, the team, Seema and a team, need to assure me that they've seen the contract, etc. And services are very, very, very engaged in that. So I've got confidence as much as I can that we will not see any of those turn to risk, because I do think, to be fair to everybody, there is a huge amount of effort and scrutiny that is going on to achieve, and we are sticking at the moment to our plan. Very clear stay from Councillor Muldowney that we will achieve a balanced budget for this year. So we because obviously we're still forecasting for an overspend, The biggest chunk that we will have against that is is because the pay awards come out a bit less. So we are still saying we are still as confident as we can be. You know, we can't. You know, if some families move into the borough or you know something changes on one of our contracts, you know, we're always at risk of that. But I am still confident that they won't increase, and we should get a balanced budget without calling on contingency.
Thank you. And can I just ask a question about this? It's by no means the largest pressure, but the pressure from expenditure on those with no recourse to public funds. Essentially, we're talking about, you know, people whose immigration status does not allow them to work or claim benefits. What are we going above? Because I think our statutory duties is a bit grey there, but are we strictly sticking to our statutory duty, or are we going beyond? Because if they've obviously got no recourse to public funds, essentially that then often puts a burden on adult or child social care. Are we strictly adhering to what we're required to do by law, or are we going beyond that?
So as far as I've been informed, we are sticking to the statutory duty, but looking at the cost centres, from what I can see, they are trying to maintain that within the budget. There may be some cases, especially I've attended some of the high cost panels, there may be some cases where they do agree some of the high cost placements for the no recourse to public funds that are slightly above. But that's on a case-by-case basis. Those panels are so in-depth and so detailed. They go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. They have other placement panels in children's social care that I've attended. I've not attended any in adults yet, actually. I need to start attending those. But in children's social care, all the panels go through. There are different panels that go through every caseloads. So everything will be on a case-by-case basis. But it's all against legal criteria as well.
Thank you. And just one final question for me in relation to capital monitoring. I'm particularly interested in the Grays Town Fund and the Tilbury Towns Fund. Obviously, the last government awarded historic levels of investment for these towns, which had previously been neglected. We've got not a tight deadline, but nonetheless, that money has to be spent or committed by March next year. So far, I think very little of it has been committed, even though the last Conservative government gave it to us quite a long while ago. Again, you can't. I'm not asking for a definitive answer. No, you can't. But an assurance that we are doing everything we can as an authority to ensure that money is utilised and we don't end up in a position where it's reclaimed for want of us doing what we should be doing with it. Because I think up until now we haven't seen this as a priority, when actually this is an opportunity to really change those towns. So I'm looking for an assurance that we are going to meet those deadlines.
So place overview and scrutiny last week, there was a very long discussion on both of those. So there was a report presented and there was a lot of in-depth discussion on both of those. So yes, there are detailed plans and it is in hand.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Fletcher?
Chair, just on that point, I believe they've had a change of chair and things look to have speeded up a lot more since.
Good. Well, it's good to know that police have also got a watchful eye on it as well, but thank you. Okay, there's no further comments then. We'll whiz through the recommendations. Again, I'm not going to take them by the exact wording because I don't think we can recommend to comment on because we've already done that, but we note the council's service position and forecast overspend position at Q2 of 2.722 million, representing a reduction of 0.348 million on a position presented at Q1. Is that noted? Yes. Noted, thank you. And do we note the council's overall position and forecast overspend position at Q2 of 1.896 million, representing a reduction of 0.209 million on the position presented at Q1? Noted.
Noted.
And we note the approval of the transfer of 1.381 million reserved to the MTFS delivery reserve and 1.5 million to an adult social care and children's social care demographic risk reserve. I'm not going to read what's in the brackets. Approved at Cabinet on the 11th of December 2024. Is that noted?
Noted.
And do we note the progress made on delivery against the savings target for 2024-25 and the remaining red unachievable rated savings? Noted. I think we've had a discussion around that. Further to an in-depth review and reprofiling of the General Fund capital projects. To note and comment, we've done that on the capital programme and the anticipated General Fund capital programme slippage of 30.627 million and 10.157 million HRA capital programme slippage projected in the report.
Noted.
Noted. Thank you. And finally, note the approval of the addition of the DEFRA grant funding in the capital programme approved at Cabinet on the 11th of December 2024. Is that noted?
Noted.
We can't really do anything else, can we? So, okay. Next item then is item 12. I think that's you, Councillor Muldowney, isn't it? Are you presenting this item?
So I'm just going to, if that's okay, Chair, I'll just do a few of the key highlights on what the report tells you, and then I'll open up to questions. So this is the draft budget and draft MTFS. So the draft budget for next year and the MTFS over the next for the following 3 years. The report starts by explaining that this budget is part of a number of key financial strategies that the council is currently reviewing, and they will manifest in the final budget and MTFS that will come back to Cabinet in February. So just the key highlights from this report, because the biggest part of this report obviously has already been subject to a separate scrutiny session attended by yourselves and the other 2 scrutiny panels, which was very, very good. So basically, in terms of the key points of this report confirms or highlights that the Council's Section 114 notice ceased on the 31st of March 24, but just confirming that even though that notice has ceased, and the report explains why another one wasn't issued, that all the expenditure controls and the governance, etc., that was in place at the time of the 114 continues, so none of that has changed. We highlight in this report the proposed saving proposals to meet our savings target of 18.2 million, which yourselves went through at scrutiny. It confirms that the draft budget for next year is based on a council tax increase of 4.99%, so that is the allowable level under the referendum limit, and that across the MTFS that is the council tax that's increased. I think in terms of the report talks about this. This report is done prior to this report was published was prepared prior to the indicative settlement being received from the government. So it was produced just after the autumn statement. Now the autumn statement made some broad brush assumptions about funding that would come into local government, but it wasn't specific at that stage. So this draft budget assumed none of that, any additional funding if that was due. We got the indicative settlement just before Christmas, so I'm in the process of just going through that and confirming what it means for the council. We are in a slightly different position here at the council because we receive exceptional financial support. If we do get new funding into the council, then it just reduces that level of exceptional financial support. But that is being worked through and will be reported back in February. We received the final settlement at the end of January. What is included in this report, so what we've been trying to do in this MTFS report is we knew that the budget last year and the MTFS was set at quite a tricky time for the council. We have tried to go through every single bit of that MTFS and make sure that it's correct, robust and reflects reflects the current activity of the council. We did significantly review all the growth that's required across the services, and there's quite a lot of detail in the budget. And it did, I think it's a sum total of 45 million of growth was added in to the MTFS for the 4-year period. Just to give members assurance, between draft and final, we have done a huge amount of work again just to review all that, and that growth figure will come down. And so because we've got some additional funding via the budget that will help bring that down, and we have also been revising some of those forecasts. So we did say at this draft stage it was draft, and we would do another run through in terms of those growth pressures. So that is the budget. That is the draft budget. As I say, we are now working on our final budget in MTFS, which will come to council in February. And what that report will also cover, as explained in here, is it will cover the updated capitalisation directive for the council. And when I say that, that means the exceptional financial support that the council requires. So if that's okay, I'll open up to questions, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Howden.
Thank you. More of a comment, really. The fact that we are now going to be subject to local government reform changes the nature of the budget from the fact that we're no longer behaving like a going concern as if we're going to survive year on year. We are essentially in the process of winding up. One of the things that strategically I would really like to see coming out of the budget is looking at the areas in which we can try and position Thurrock strongest as we go into local government reform. There aren't a huge amount of things that we're nationally known as experts for. Adult social care is something we are known as an expert for. As someone who works in the healthcare industry, I frequently cite Thurrock as an example of how to get healthcare right. So if there was, and I don't expect you to answer now because I know it's an open-ended question, but if there was anything that we could do to buttress some of our really star-performing directorates, so as we go through the process of reform and the county is carved up and different departments are carved up, and you look at what staff do and don't need to be tupied in a new structure, making sure that some of our really star-performing departments are in the best possible position to try and hopefully not just survive into a new structure, but actually emerge as this is going to be Thurrock's contribution to a new structure. We are going to anchor adult social care on, for example, the Thurrock model, because we get it right as it is. So if there is anything we could do in the budget to try and put us in the best strategic position as we look at a new reality, that is certainly one service that I think would warrant it.
I mean, I'll just comment on that. It's a very sensible, observation. I think in terms of the budget, we can't do anything specific. The best thing we can do, both from a financial perspective and from a directorate perspective, is so in terms of finance, we have to continue what we're doing at the moment, meeting all those financial targets that we have to achieve. So we're going to achieve our savings target in the current year. We've achieved our savings target for next year, and until anything changes, we still have targets across our MTFS that we have to achieve. So the best thing we can do is make sure that we continue on our current track of making sure we achieve all our financial targets. Councillor Muldown has already referred to this. We need to make sure we continue with our asset disposals as per planned, and we continue with our divestments as planned, because us achieving those, generates great confidence with MHCLG, which is very, very important that we are doing everything we can. And obviously, I mean, Rob's here, I don't want to speak for Rob, but the services, we do very well in social care. Obviously, children's social care was outstanding, and those services will continue, because that's the best thing that we can do to make sure that when all those considerations about when the councils are stopped and reconfigured together, the good practice and the good financial management, because just because we've got exceptional support does not mean to say we don't manage our finances well. We do manage them tightly, and I do think we are really getting to grips with our finances. That's the best thing we can do at the moment.
Can I come here?
Possibly, if I was just to very quickly add, thank you for the comments. It's a different subject, so I won't dwell on it here today. but just to be assured that the council services are going to continue beyond 2026 or 2027. There still need to be children's social work, adult social work, etc. As you're well aware. We are already working in the space of how well we do deliver things. Not complacent. We've still got much more that we can improve, but working at place, working with system partners. We do already work closely to try and kind of promote how good our model of practice is, and we're working with Southend at the moment, who we've both been called for a CQC inspection around the same time. And there's a close alignment with how we're trying to think and how we're trying to deliver things. So we communicate really closely across the system, and that's getting stronger as the time goes by. And we are already trying to kind of look at how we embed our model for the future, because not only is it good service, but actually we think it's really cost effective. It's as cost effective as you can be.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Howden. I think it's a really good forward-looking question. It's difficult to quantify anything at the moment, obviously, because we're very, very early on in the... Well, we haven't even heard if we've been accepted onto the priority programme yet, but obviously there is work already being done to look at just our plans that we've got now, and because some of those aren't going to be relevant, as you say, we're not going to exist on this footprint as a council sort of in 2 or 3 years' time, although obviously the services that we deliver will be delivered on an ongoing basis. So, but I think it's a really great question, and we will be working very hard to make sure that the good practice that we've got in Thurrock that has been developed over the years will be taken forward. And I'm sure, I've had various discussions with officers just over the last couple of weeks about looking forward to that and what it might be, and the things that we can take forward and make our contribution to whatever the new configuration is with the new unitary councils. So I want to thank you for that question, because I think it's a great question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I suppose.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Dawn. I know you do your best and you always put things over in a good manner. Council tax increase is going to be 4.99. So as is compared with other authorities at present, and also in the past when it's been 4.99, it's included should we say a police precept as well, and it was 3% or 3 whatever plus 2% for police precept. Is there incorporating that, or we don't want that popping up as another 2% on top? That's what I'm trying to establish. Yeah.
In terms of how we benchmark, I can't tell you the specific numbers because I have actually got Andy looking at this, because it's one of the things we need to look at. But we are still lower than our comparator group in terms of our band D properties, and so that is something. Now we've got our MTFS thoroughly reviewed. That is something that we are now looking at in terms of where we benchmark. So we are still lower. So actually, I'm going to note this because we should put that in the report. In terms of the precept, that's a good question, because it will. I need to check that, if I'm being honest, because it will increase it, but I don't think it'll be very much, because our precepts are very, very low. Yeah, but I'll check that for you and I'll come back to you.
It does count the adult social care precept though, within that 4.99%. That does include the adult social care precept within that 4.99. I mean, we can't do anything about police, fire and crime commissioner precept. That's not within our remit, is it? As a council.
No, you're right. Sorry, I should have picked 2.99% core and 2% for the adult social care precept. I will check on the other precept, because Councillor Muldowney is correct. It is not within our control, but they're very, very small in terms of the percentages, so it shouldn't make too much of an impact, but we will check.
Thank you. Just quick couple of questions from me. In the autumn budget, it was announced obviously that employers' national insurance contributions would be increasing. Is there a consequence of that to the council? Does it create a further pressure, and if so, what is it, and what are we doing to mitigate it?
So in terms of national insurance, the government has told us that for employer so payroll national insurance for us, we'll get compensation for. What we will not receive compensation for is supplier NI. Now, what the government have said is that they, and I need to look for the name of the new grant that they've given us, which is called it's called the recovery grant. They're 600 million nationally. They have said that their expectation is some of that new grant funding will cover the NI. The supplier NI. Now, at the moment, it's quite difficult to gather data about what the quantity of any supplier NI will be, because obviously there'll be things in contracts already that will dictate some of what will happen. But what we have tried to do when we've set the final budget in February is, when we've been looking at inflation, we have tried to, so for example on the in adults and on the national living wage, the team have been working very closely with ADAS and John Jackson to make sure that the percentages that we put in try to get that balance right between accounting for what we think might be an impact of supplier NI, and but also making sure that we don't inflate our inflation so much, because obviously we need to get that balance right. So I think, and once again, I haven't got a crystal ball, so I can't say for certain, but we have tried where possible to reflect in the final budget inflation that should cover us for supplier NI as far as we can predict it at the moment.
Thank you. And just very briefly, in terms of council tax collection rates, the MTFS is based on a 99% collection rate. I know Thurrock's traditionally been very good, or so we're told. The figures, a lot of people don't believe them, but we've always been very good at collections. Is that stretching it, 99%? I don't think we've ever quite hit that. I might be wrong, but I don't think we've ever quite hit 99%, have we?
So the current MTFS that we had in place before the draft budget was based on 99%, but we don't hit that target. So this draft budget is based on 98.8%, which is our actual collection rate. So this document that you've got in front of you, assumes collection of 98.8, and we'll continue with that at final.
Thank you. Are there any other final questions? No. Okay. Bless you. The recommendations are cabinet recommendations. Obviously, we won't take those, but we're asked to note and comment, and I think we've done that. So thank you, Dawn.
Apologies, it's my turn. We're working along the line.
Yeah. Just face that way when you do it. Okay, so item 13, fees and charges 2025-26, page 171. I think, is that you again, Dawn? Thank
Fortunately. Oh gosh. So this is the annual fees and charges report, and an updated policy and the schedule of fees and charges. So what we're trying to do within the updated policy is, we do spend an inordinate amount of time on fees and charges, and that's quite a drain on our resources. So what we're going for now is, and this is quite a consistent practice across most authorities, because this is what I must admit is what I'm used to. I think you're used to that at your authorities as well, Seema. Is every year, so around about September time, we will agree what we call a backstop date. So we will say what are our fees and charges going to go up by next year, and we will base that on CPI and a percentage to our full cost recovery, and that will be set. And then what our services will be asked to look at is where their fees and charges need to deviate from that standard rate. It could be, for example, they've done some benchmarking and where we're becoming uncompetitive, so it might be that we will put an increase in lower than that. It might be that we have done some benchmarking where we're behind and we will put fees and charges up by slightly more. And obviously these are just fees and charges where we have the ability to set them. Some are set statutory. And what it's trying to do is to, and then what we will do in the report, as we've done in this one, is where people want to deviate from that core, that backstop arrangement, we'll explain that in the report. So that's what we've got, the new policy. That's the base on which we've set the fees and charges for this year. There are, and in our MTFS, there are 10 saving proposals that relate to fees and charges at £1.6 million across those 10. So obviously we will be monitoring them as part of the MTFS. What we are also going to do as well is in our quarterly monitoring report that Seema and her team do, is we will include a summary reporting of fees and charges, so the global figure of fees and charges, so committee get confidence that what we have got in our income budgets when they've been inflated, apart from the specific fees and charges, that we are on track to deliver that. And the other thing we've just put in is in this report we'll put in a new delegation into me, that if we need to agree fees and charges in year or changes, at the moment it's quite complicated to do that and we just need to make it quicker, that'll be delegated to myself in conjunction with Councillor Muldowney as the resources PH and the PH for whichever directorate it is, and obviously if we do that we will then report it in our quarterly report to Cabinet.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Howden.
Just say I really welcome the approach. We had a conversation, I think Councillor Manning will correct me, it was about 8 years ago, and we said it was just absurd that we have this merry-go-round every year where we treat fees and charges like it's only just been discovered as a concept, and it always becomes an absurdly intensely politicised conversation, as if inflation is something that you choose what the rate is going to be each year. So just as a matter of principle, this is very welcome.
I'm really pleased that you've said that, because what we want to do with this policy is use less resource there, and also it helps us focus on areas that we do want to maybe look at our fees and charges, because we have a massive schedule, and like you say, we spend an age, so I'm really pleased to hear that comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. I mean, Councillor Howden and I both sat on Cabinet, and an inordinate amount of resource and attention went into fees and charges every year. Some years we would have, specific cabinets, informal cabinets just to look at fees and charges, and it was, as you say, it was a huge amount of effort and resource went into that. So I agree with the sentiment there. It's really is welcome. Just a couple of quick questions on this. Following the intervention, I think we were specifically mandated to look at fees and charges and maximise income from them. Interesting, there's no Commissioner comment, therefore. Are they satisfied that we are meeting that obligation?
This is an older version of the report, so we have just published. I can read the Commissioner comment out if you would like. The one that's gone in the final report.
No, thank
Nicole is broadly happy. Nicole is happy with the backstop arrangement and the principle. What she just wants is a little bit more reporting around fees and charges and some details around debt. We don't have any specific bad debt provision for fees and charges. It's predominantly linked to children's and adults. The fees that we charge, but we will make sure that that what Nicole wants in we'll put in.
Thank you for that. And just one other question. I think one of the last informal cabinets I went to, when we were looking at fees and charges, officers were actually trying to identify those things we didn't charge for at all. And the suggestion was at that time there were potentially hundreds of different things that other councils charge for that we don't. In addition to reviewing the existing fees and charges, are we sure that we are looking? I accept we don't want to impose punitive charges, but the reality is if other councils are doing it, we should be doing it as well, because if there's a cost to something and it isn't being borne by the person who should be paying it, it falls to our taxpayers usually. So are we sure that we are charging, or we've introduced fees and charges for the maximum range of services or whatever we can impose fees and charges for?
I would say, it's like with everything. I do think we are charging fees and charges for as much as we can, because obviously we've got the statutory and then we've got our own, and directorates have done a huge amount of work in looking at where they need to deviate. And I think the fact that we've got 1.6 million in our MTFS that is from fees and charges does give you confidence that directorates are really looking at where we can push, either if we're not doing stuff we should be putting charges in, or we're pushing charges where we can. But I think what I'm hoping with this approach is, because we're going to be more focused on fees and charges, it will give us a little, we can spend a bit more time on focusing on a bit more benchmarking with other authorities to see maybe perhaps if we have got any of those areas. I think there's been so much time spent on, you know, I mean, I always find it fascinating with the fees and charges list, because about 80% of the schedule you probably never charge, or you charge once or twice. So we just need to say, put it up by inflation, just let's move on. So I think our new approach will help us use our resources better and make sure that we do pick up your points. Are we maximising, you know, are we doing everything? We haven't got anything missed.
Thank you. Just conscious of time. Councillor Evans, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this. I'm just a slight concern on burial costs increase, because I know, like, you know, these ethnic communities, and I know so many families, they always struggle, you know, when it comes to burials, and we literally have to do fundraising, you know. So to them, this around 15%, you know, from 2,100 to 2,500 is a huge increase, you know. So obviously, at those times of difficulties, I know we're not going to make a lot of money from this, you know, because we have increased in various other, you know, sections. So if we can kindly review this, you know, there's not like a huge number of deaths, but that would be a very human side of kind of, you know, looking into this, because I personally know so many people, and we literally have done fundraising, you know, to do those burials, and we need to keep in mind those, not like their whole families are here. Sometimes those are individuals, sometimes certain family members, so they don't have these resources. So for them, this 15% or like 14.95% is a huge increase, you know. So I would request you to please reconsider this.
We can have a look at, I mean, we have sort of decreased some on in this area and increased others. It is all benched on benchmarking. Now, sorry, so this should have really been put in the narrative. It is based on benchmarking, so we are not doing anything different to what other authorities do, in terms of trying to match our charges up to what other people are doing. So we're not an outlier.
What I can say is I will talk to the relevant officers about this before it comes to Cabinet.
Yeah.
And at least get you an explanation for why these increases are being made. I can't promise that I can take them out, but I will look into it for you, Councillor Abbas.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. If you look at numbers, you know, the income stream from these ones, I don't think so, especially from, say, for example, the Muslim burials or Nepalese burials are making a huge difference. So literally they're like, say, 10 or 15 graves, you know, in last 3, 4, 5 years. So if we can kindly look on this, you know, so that would be a very positive message to these communities.
Thank you. No further comments, questions? Okay, thank you. Again, this is a Cabinet report, so the recommendations aren't strictly relevant to us, but we've noted and commented on the report. I think that point made by Councillor Abbas, if we are going to make a recommendation to Cabinet or officers between now and this item coming to Cabinet, that they look at that. I completely agree. We need to be benchmarking. We should impose fees and charges that and neighbours or comparative local authorities are imposing. But this is a bit different in that obviously there is a compassionate reason to look at this, and perhaps it's an increase that could be staggered over a number of years. I don't know, but you've undertaken to have a look at that, and we're grateful, so thank you. So moving on to item 14 is the work programme. Are there any comments, or are there any items that members would like added to the work programme? I note that the February meeting, I think, currently has one item on it, or two if you count the work programme. So if there are any items, yep.
Just one comment, Chair, that...
sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, sorry.
Lucy, did you want to...
Just on the back of that point, Councillor Maney, Seema and Dawn can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Q3 financial position report won't be ready for February. No, it's not. So it'll be going to March, just to clarify that.
So the next one's March.
Sounds like it.
Unless anyone has anything for February.
Oh, no.
At the moment,
No.
we have nothing on the agenda for the February meeting other than the work programme. I'm sure you don't want to turn up just to agree a work programme. So if there are any items we want added to that.
Done in 2 hours, Chair.
Councillor Fletcher.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, what I was going to say, I mean, obviously, you know, even before that information, 1 item in February and about 5 items in March. Are there any of the March items that could be brought forward?
We.
A very good
I mean,
suggestion.
that possibly requires a conversation with the people presenting it, but
I can have that conversation with officers. I'm not sure because of the tight deadlines that officers work to whether that will be possible, but I can take that away and have that conversation and report back.
Well, frankly, if we cancel the February meeting and we still need 2 meetings, if we're not going to have an election in May, there's no reason the February meeting couldn't become an April meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Jones.
I'd just like to keep an update on the Grange Waters. Now, we spoke about it at great length tonight, and obviously, you know, they're going to start putting things in place. So I'd just like for it to come back, and we know where we are with it, with our pennies that's been put in. Can it be done?
Just to give you assurance, because Grange Waters is part of the budget proposals for next year, that will be monitored through the monthly savings tracker. So that will come to Cabinet every quarter, so you will get an update on that as part of the quarterly report.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've got some conversations to have obviously outside of the meeting then. Councillor Fletcher has a very sensible suggestion to see whether we can bring some of those items forward. If not, then we'll look at perhaps rescheduling meetings or have some thoughts or whether there's some other things we can consider, but we'll deal with that outside of the meeting. Obviously, if any members do think of anything that they'd like added to the work programme for February, please obviously speak up. But, okay, so we are just in time. It is 25 minutes past 9. Thank you everybody for your attendance, members and officers and the portfolio holder. I close the meeting now and we'll see about a meeting in February.